Cheers. So I've noticed all these videos have been posted the last few days around this, what is it, the OM Digital Solutions, OM1, I think is what they're calling it, the WOW camera. Sounds so silly. I think the real camera, Olympus or OM Digital or OM Digital Solutions, whatever they want to call themselves, they should make an XAD, an OM Digital, or if they can use the Olympus name, an XAD. I used to have the Olympus XA, the original, and then later picked up the XA4. And then I think different camera but similar kind of ethos was the Stylus Epic. They all had a clamshell. These are all film cameras, 35mm point and shoot film cameras. They all had a kind of a clamshell sliding lens cover. With the Epic, it actually, when you opened it, the lens came out a little bit because it was an autofocus camera. While the XA and XA4, it was a manual focus, a zone focus camera. You just could kind of pick general zones, increments, focus distances that had a little slider switch on the front. But I feel, knowing what Olympus did with the Pen F and all those kind of retro film simulations, which I think that camera seems to be unique. I never owned any of these Olympus cameras. The only Olympus camera I've owned two, I still actually I guess have one, is the Tough TG6, I guess. I got from my kids. It's like a pool camera. And then I had it years ago. I'd bought my wife, I think it was called the XZ1. It was a point and shoot camera. It was white and it said f1.8 on the front.
Everybody, I've got 1.8. Check that out.
Because that was like a big deal to have a semi-fast lens on a point and shoot. I think the XA, the retro vibe that sells, everybody buys retro now, you know, it definitely does sell. Fuji, Olympus were good examples of that. And just look at the Fuji Instax, like people are into that retro. And I think you could consider like a good example, I guess, would be the Fuji X70. That camera wasn't really successful from what I understand when it came out. It wasn't a great seller. It was kind of like they delayed the product and brought it out later. But it became like a total cult classic. I bought it new back when it was $699. This is years ago. And then I sold it 2-ish years later, used. It was in good shape, but I listed it on eBay for $699. Buy it now. And I sold it for that. Meaning I probably could have gotten more. And it's just interesting to see, you know, a camera used a couple years later to be able to be sold for the same that it sold new. And I haven't checked the prices recently, but I'm sure they're still pretty high, because you see stuff like the X Pro 1. I see good condition ones used still going for like $499. That's what I sold mine for, like, you know, used many years later. I had it at least, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. I'd had it a while. And I sold it for $499, something around $500, and they were going pretty commonly for that. So there's definitely an interest in some of these cameras that are unique. And I think an XAD would really play off the Olympus XA fans, that mostly film shooters, but I'm sure even some, you know, less likely to shoot film types would get into it because it's digital. And I think they could really play off that, and they could make it plastic, because like the Stylus Epic was plastic, and you know, people love that camera. And I know they've gone with the, what is it, the EM5 Mark III or 4, whatever the most recent EM5 was, that became a plastic camera. It used to be magnesium. EM10, I think, had been plastic maybe almost the whole time, or for most of the recent versions. So it could be cheaper, simpler to manufacture by OM Digital. They don't have to invest too much R&D. It'd really just recycle a lot of the same stuff, you know, put the same guts as whatever the current EM10 or EM5 body has. And you could figure out a way, I'm sure, to do some minor modifications to something like that 17mm 1.8 lens, or, you know, maybe some slightly different focal length, but something around, I think the XA was a 38 or 35mm, something like that, or 32, right around the 35mm range. That's what made me think of the 17. If they can get it to fit inside, sort of like an X100 or an RX1 or a lot of these fixed lens cameras, it ends up being a lot smaller because the lens is kind of inside the body because it's not interchangeable. And they could probably get a pretty small body. They could even go and like really harken back to it and have a sliding clamshell cover instead of a normal pinch lens cap or pop slip-on cap like the X100, and just do some type of built-in sliding cap. And I think that camera would sell crazy, especially if they're trying to get back. I think they're barely making it. I think 2021 was really evidence of that. They they basically were just selling or they were bringing to production products that had already had the R&D done previously. It's it wasn't a big investment on whatever JIM or whatever that brand is that kind of, or the company that bought the camera division from Olympus. And I don't think they were putting much into it. And even this WOW camera, I question it because I feel like it looks a lot like they recycled a lot of the EM1X as far as the body. Though I did notice some of those photos, it does look like it's not a battery grip camera. So maybe they took the top plate and maybe the top portion of that chassis and modified it to be more like the EM13. The guts, I guess, are a little bit different, newer sensor and whatnot. We'll see. We'll find out Tuesday, I guess, is what they're saying, next week, the 15th. I'm sure that camera might sell to the Olympus fanatics, but $2,000 camera is not going to get any new. Nobody's looking at Olympus and Micro Four Thirds right now as like to get into that system. I mean, let's be honest. And bringing another $2,000 camera to the market, it's you're only going to sell to existing Micro Four Thirds users who haven't jumped ship yet. And okay, you've kept a few people on, but I think if they're trying to keep that camera division going, they want to bring on new customers. I think that's just kind of how it works. If you're trying to actually sell a product, and they need something, they need an actual WOW camera, not some higher spec, high end camera. Because $2,000 is a lot of money, especially for Micro Four Thirds. You remember what my videos talking about the Z5 and the A7 IV, and part of the reason I couldn't get behind some of those full frame systems because they were just such big money, $2,500, that range, and that's how I ended up with the XT4. I got it on sale for the 1,500 when it was on $1,499 on that sale, and that was significantly less. To spend another $500 on top of that, I spent $2,000 on a Micro Four Thirds camera. Very questionable. I don't think you're going to get many new people buying into it. But if you brought out sort of like a parts bin special, which I think is Olympus's MO, of Pen F, so as far as the processor or some modification of that processor, I think the Pen F was only contrast focused, so that's kind of crap. But take the Pen Fs, whatever you already programmed them, all those simulations with that little dial, figure out a way to integrate that onto a newer plastic body that's going to be cheaper to manufacture because it's plastic, you're not making it out of exotic materials, and maybe put a newer processor. I think the newest EM10s and EM5s maybe use phase, like the EM1. Don't even use the EM1 hardware because that's going to be too expensive. Put that in that little shell. Throw in your favorite, Olympus viewfinder. They love that 2.69 megapixel LCD EVF for this type of camera. Who cares? Good enough. It doesn't even need to have big magnification because it needs to be small. Put that in there. Maybe you could even use some of the housing stuff from the old EP5 and stuff that kind of had a similar, smaller shape. Figure out a way to build that 17 1.8 lens into that body and make it smaller. Hell, you don't even need the sliding, because I don't even know how they would figure that out. They could just have like a clip-on. Imagine like a lens cap that like just slides onto the front, but it kind of has the front look of an XA, just for those people. I don't know. And then you could give a secondary normal pinch cap in the box or something for when you're actually using it and not just kind of oogling it. And I think that if they got that out for, under like for $999, that would sell like crazy. Considering the GR3 Ricoh is pretty boring, and it's magnesium, and they wanted $1,000 for that camera, which I think was a ripoff. And then they have the GR3X that's like, what, it's over 1,000, I think. Or maybe the GR3 was originally 1,000, but I think it's $899 now. But get down to that $1,000 price point, I think you'll grab some people, especially the, kind of the hipster film retro vibe people, who's a lot of us. I would buy one if it kind of checked all these boxes I'm talking about. And being you know, not a system camera and just being a point and shoot, people don't even need to concern themselves about investing into a, you know, another lens system, another mount, because it's a point and shoot. Just like the X100 shooters, there's plenty of full frame Sony, Canon, whatever shooters, DSLR shooters who bought an X100 series because it was just neat and it's all in one. And Olympus could do that too. And they have the, or whoever, you know, OM Digital, they have the history, even though it's not the same company per se, they kind of have that heritage. At least they can claim to have it through that brand name. So I think that's the camera Olympus, that's the WOW camera Olympus should be making, an XAD. But I don't think they'll make it. I think they're just gonna spit out this camera and it won't sell very well, and they might spit another lens or two, like that 20 millimeter or whatever that came out. And I think they're gonna have a really pathetic 2022, and I think they'll kind of fade away in 2023. That's unfortunate, but I think it's reality. Anyway, that was my 2 cents on that topic. Cheers.